So welcome everyone to Webinar Wednesday on behavior management. We have a team here who is going to present the SNAP program. We have Fred here live with us at the Learn office, and Marissa and Nicole who are joining us. You would see them as SNAP implementation team in the video. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to the SNAP team, starting with Fred.
Good morning, everyone. Is it still morning? No, it's afternoon. So we're starting with that. Very happy to be here today. Very happy to be representing CDI, that's Child Development Institute out of Toronto. They are an organization that is right across the country and in several other countries as well. My role is to my company, FL Collective, but I do represent CDI. I represent them here in Quebec. Marissa, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Marissa Silver, and I am a SNAP Community Development Specialist here at Child Development Institute, which you'll hear us refer to as CDI throughout the presentation. And I'm beside my colleague.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole De Silva.
And thanks for inviting us to join you today.
Thank you for being here. So let's find out a little bit more about what you all offer in terms of resources and tools for behavior management. And as we share the presentation with you, what we're going to ask those of you watching to do is to answer the poll that you should be seeing on your screen at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. I see some results coming in. So some from preschool, some from primary.
Wonderful. So we have CDA, and CDA stands for Community Development Agent.
Okay.
And these are the people that are the liaison between the school and the community. They foster partnerships to support student success and also to open up the school to community vitality. And that is the short version. They do a lot of things in the CLC in the community schools. Yes.
Right.
We have administrators, consultants, and people that work kind of across the board. And in some schools, they have from preschool up until grade 11 in one building. Yeah, yeah.
I have been across the province and seen several of the CLCs. Mostly, my background is from working with CHSSN. So you're probably all aware of the network partnership initiatives that happen there. Very good. So I want to start by thanking Catherine Dimas and Debbie Horks, who's hiding in the corner over here. Thank you very, very much for having us in to speak with the CLC network. I look forward to meeting you all at some point in time in our treks around Quebec. Today we're going to be talking about the SNAP program, Stop Now and Plan. Here in Quebec, and we're going to be bringing to you some of the tools and some of the opportunities. There are opportunities that we can bring into different schools right across the province. Some tools will be looking at Learn to launch on their platform. I'm speaking with my hands quite a lot. I'm seeing them wave there. Sorry about that. So I guess what we're going to do first is just get going. We've got a video, the first video. If you click on that link, you'll find that we'll allow the program to be introduced by Kevin and by Emma. They basically are the target. I would say one of the targets. You will probably recognize this target in your in your areas as well.
So if you can go ahead and click on the link that is in the chat box, you'll be able to screen the video.
Please just raise a hand when you're finished.
Maybe folks can just let us know in the chat box or through a raised hand if they've finished the videos. The video, my apologies. Great, thank
Very
you.
good. So did everyone get a chance to see that just by show of hands?
Yep.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Yeah, we like to run this video because it basically gives you the message more from where we're trying to actually affect change, from the kids' perspective, making sure that the kids are actually living a better life and a better experience. We find this will definitely help them be interested in their school life, in their home life, in several instances. Mike can't see it. Mike cannot see it.
Okay. If anyone's having any difficulties viewing the videos, what we're going to do is we'll add them in the follow-up email so that you'll be able to go back and view them if you're experiencing any technical difficulties with that.
Very good. So we're going to be going on to the next slide at this point. So this is basically a little bit of the lay of the land on Child Development Institute and the program, the SNAP program. So in development, and I will say in development for 33 years. It's been a piece that, yes, was written 33 years ago. It has been adapted to different circumstances. And Child Development Institute has implemented this program in a real global presence throughout many communities. It's not all that CDI does. CDI actually works from 4 different quadrants. The early intervention services is where SNAP exists, where SNAP is residing. Family violence services is something else that CDI does focus on. Integra is a program where they work with children with disabilities and specifically learning disabilities.
Yeah, it's the intersection of learning disabilities and mental health challenges for children.
And the healthy child development is a research area that they've been working on for several years, bringing all kinds of all kinds of things together, right, specifically in the visioning. The first quadrant, the SNAP program, really has been there for the 35 years. Actually, CDI has existed for over 100 years, helping children and families, and they have an established track record in Ontario and elsewhere, which we'd love to share with you. Okay, so on to the next slide, please. So, the big issue. We know that over 20% of, or 100,000 children or more across Canada are struggling with some sort of mental health issue. That's 1 in 5. We're actually finding that those numbers might be on the rise, or at least the incidence of people self-reporting is on the rise for sure. We also have to take a look at the next stat. The 60% of incarcerated males come from a background of child conduct problems, a history which really has followed them and brought them on a different trajectory that we might want to avoid. Down below, you'll see the money, the costs. This is really a huge issue. It's a huge issue on a couple of levels. Specifically, we're spending all kinds of money that could be spent on other programs. So we're oftentimes starting off well, then we have this big gap, and then we play catch up. We oftentimes are looking at that 12 and on, that teenage years, as playing a catch up. There really is not a lot of prevention happening, and we're going to address that with this program. We're going to address that with several other programs that are like SNAP, but this one we found to be quite useful in all kinds of ways.
If I can just interject for a second, Fred, we often sort of like to point out the fact that through our, as Fred said, sort of 34 years of research and practice with the SNAP program, to sort of frame that, SNAP really got its start as an early intervention violence and crime prevention program for children. Designed when children under the age of 12 could no longer be picked up by police, in this case in the Toronto area, and everybody was sort of scrambling to figure out how that we could continue to support and serve children and families who were continuing to show signs of challenge and struggle. Now that they couldn't sort of get those services or any of that direction, probably for the best, from the justice system. So that's why a lot of our early, a lot of our research over the 34 years of the program being in existence sort of frames itself in this crime prevention lens, as you see in these slides. But what we of course know is that children with what we would consider externalizing behaviors, the types of behaviors that tend to get them into trouble in the community, in school, and oftentimes at home as well, often happen hand in hand with the more internalizing behaviors, so things like anxiety and depression. So often by targeting or tackling one issue, we're able to see improvements in those internalizing behaviors as well. And I think what we see, and maybe those of you on the line with us can let us know later if this is something that you see as well, that we know that schools and the community and lots of families at home are struggling, really facing difficult challenges with these externalizing behaviors. We have kids in the classroom who are acting out. We have kids who we're finding hard to sort of serve or engage in the classroom, school, or community setting because their behaviors are quite disruptive, and we're challenged to know how to deal with them. And yet a lot of the programs and resources that tend to sort of trickle through the pipelines where kids are on the ground are focusing more on those internalizing issues, the anxiety and depression. And so while we absolutely know that we want to be paying attention to those internalizing issues, we can't be ignoring the externalizing challenges that are being faced by teachers, administrators, parents, and community members as well. Because as this statistic sort of points out, that conduct disorder continues to be the most prevalent diagnoses for kids in this 6 to 11 age range. So we want to make sure that we're not paying, attention to the anxiety and depression at the expense of not paying attention to those externalizing challenges as well.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Thank you. And we already have some questions coming in, and we're gonna save it for a Q&A period. Maybe we'll find a little natural spot to have a Q&A period at the end, maybe a little bit earlier. But just very quickly, it's a question around any understanding about generational trauma found in First Nations communities. So perhaps at this point, I would like you to answer in a simple, very, very short answers. Have you worked with some of the First Nations communities or First Nations families?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes, the short answer is yes, yeah, and we consider SNAP to be a trauma-informed program. We've worked closely with Indigenous communities to ensure that as programs are being delivered in those communities, that we are aware of and responsive to those issues and communities.
Wonderful, thank you. That was a great question. Thank you for asking that, Mike. And we'll come back to that in the end. I think there's we have a lot of CLC schools, that work with Indigenous communities, First Nations communities, and that is definitely a question that's come up before. Great. Thank you. Okay.
And on to the next. So a lot of this was just covered by what Marissa was saying. Really, the more important part for me is the lower half of this slide. If left untreated, we all know the situations when left untreated usually don't get better. They actually head towards a trajectory that could lead to school disruptions, suspensions, violence is really where we're headed. The costs escalate at every level on this, and ultimately, if we're looking as well at the 6 to 12, we're oftentimes able to bring the problem really together with the family, working with the family on a lot of the issues, which really gives us a lot of the answers in that left untreated area. If we actually can work with the kids in a truly organic way, then we're actually mitigating the problems.
So perhaps you all can go into the chat box and answer the question that we put there, which is, do you currently work with children that have some sort of disruptive behavioral issues or problems, however you define that? So it could be a simple yes or no, because the follow-up question is, if you do have children or currently work with children that have some of these issues, do you have access to supports? What are some of the supports that you already have access to? Or do you feel that there's a lack of support to you as a in your role, or for others that might be around in the school or in your center? So we have some community organizations that are going to be participating and watching this as well.
Excellent.
So that's as a reflective question. And for those of you in the room, if you could put some of your, we're getting a lot of yeses. A lot of yes daily.
A thumbs up scenario all around. Yeah. No, unfortunately, the place that this heads at a younger and younger age is really self-medicating, substance abuse and situations that really can counter for several years. Any kind of solution for these families, for these children.
Yeah. So some of the resources that are available. SETs, psychoeducateur, social services, Some are saying same as above, yes. Some schools have emotion rooms, calm down areas. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Are you finding as well that just by a thumbs up, is this services that actually cost families money? Are they going to private services, or are they finding it in a public scenario?
Some are saying that they have a huge lack of support in their region. So
Yeah.
I guess it really depends on the regions.
Mix
Mix of both. So some are free of charge. Some have to be paid for, private and public. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely. I have a SNAP child, and I know the emotional costs as well as the physical costs related to helping children. My 4 children have gone through different services at different times.
So I think, what this leads us into on the next slide is, why we want to work with children in this 6 to 11-year-old sort of age range. Because we alluded before to the fact that, if we're not able to intervene and provide some supports and services when they're younger, both the behaviors that kids may start to display become that much bigger and more challenging and expensive to address. We know that teenagers can be more challenging to engage in service generally than younger children would be. And that, as Fred alluded to, that the other sort of compounding and complicating factors as kids become adolescents, if they start, self-medicating or self-treating or getting into other types of issues that can come hand in hand if a child is experiencing or displaying sort of impulse control and problem solving challenges, that those are all things that we want to head off. And of course, we know when we're looking at a child at age 6 or 7, it's very challenging for us to know as professionals whether what they're going through is sort of a developmental blip that will right itself with the types of supports that you've already indicated are available and accessible to that child and family within school and the community, or whether that kid is possibly on a more persistent, negative pathway. So rather than waiting until they're 14, 15, 16 to see how persistent those behaviors have become and then try to intervene, we really see this middle childhood window as an amazing, the research calls it 7 years of warning. We like to refer to it as a 7-year window of opportunity, when kids are really primed for intervention and treatment before those problems have gotten so big that they become that much more challenging and expensive to tackle. And that we're sort of casting a wide net when the kids are young rather than waiting to see what happens down the road.
That's it. On to the next. So just to show that 7 age is really the sweet spot to start. To wait till they're later in the situation, we're actually getting to the point where we may lose control. And we definitely lose control of costs if you look at different programs in that 12 and above range. Oftentimes they're not really working on that prevention piece. Heading on to the next. Mm-hmm. This slide is really an amalgam story. It's the story of Tyler, but there's many Tylers. The Tylers that are basically covered by this slide really have been served in different color tranches, have been served at different times in their lives. The green one is really the SNAP program. You'll see that over the years, it is the program that costs the least to deliver because the intervention is really started young. Agir tôt, the concept is there. We know it well in Quebec. We need to actually implement, and it really is these implementations that will make the difference. Starting at age 10, as an average is really where we can avert the most costs. Going to 14, costs rise. Going to 17, costs rise substantially. And left uncapped, left unattended to, or in a sense, if we're waiting and never doing anything, we're going to spend the money anyways, but in much different ways, in usually the criminal justice system.
Yeah, the costs referred to, so this was a study that was done by Public Safety Canada through the federal government. And the costs that you see sort of show up in those red lines become so high because we start looking at, yes, criminal justice expenses and costs. We're looking at health costs. So, you know, admissions to ER departments, working with doctors and a variety of professionals. It's things like missed income, you know, or absenteeism for families from work when they have to deal with their children going through the system. There's a really wide range of, or the inability of that young person to participate in in employment in a successful way as well. So like as we said, those costs just become compounding. But the good news is we have a solution.
So on to the next. SNAP works. We actually have seen that for 34 years. The slide at the beginning said 33 years. It is 33 years of finished research. SNAP has proven itself over time. We're committed to bringing SNAP to 100 new communities across Canada. We actually have startup monies for that, which I'll address later in the presentation. And on to the next slide, please. So what is SNAP? What does it stand for? It's Stop Now and Plan, Stop, N'agis pas, Analyse et Planifie. It is in English and in French. It's available as a evidence-based trauma-informed gender-specific model. Yes, we do work with boys separately from girls. We found that it's not a big difference for the boy group, but definitely a big difference for the girl group. So we're actually looking at making sure that we have that encapsulated. We work with a scientist practitioner model. And as I have said, there's probably 35 years of research. So this research can definitely be used in all kinds of ways and is available to you. If anyone is interested, I could definitely send out more. I get my colleagues to send more. If you look at the bottom of this slide, bottom right corner, you'll see that there have been already developed culturally sensitive responses, First Nations and the Black community. So we basically believe in adaptation. I believe as well that coming into Quebec will be an adaptation. And that is, in my perspective, that's the good news. CDI is prepared to look at how we bring this in. We do have everything ready in English and French right now, manualized program all the way across in all of the different streams, and we'll get to those streams in just a moment. On to the next slide. This is really just to reiterate that there is a time that we need to be working on this. Otherwise, it does get harder to do. Such as me dealing with technology at my age, sometimes harder to do. But if you could click it one more time, we actually have that sweet spot right there where the brain is most able to change, where children and young adults really start their trajectory to change. It is an important time, and it's something that we never really can address much later in life. Okay. Marissa, you do this so well. I am actually going to call on you to.
Actually going to let Nicole do this one.
Oh, very good.
I'll let Nicole. I'm going to ask Nicole to do this.
Yeah, so here we'll be talking about kind of the sequence of what SNAP is and how it actually works. So you can see there's that stoplight visual, really just kind of showing the different steps of stop, now, and plan. So as we've said, SNAP is an emotional regulation tool that really helps children as well as adults, because we also have to regulate ourselves in moments when we're feeling emotionally aroused. So just learning how to really stop and think before we act and gain control. So the first step of SNAP is really to stop. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our body. What's happening in our body? Is our heart rate increasing? Are we breathing shallow? Are we feeling hot? And so then we're going to choose something that's going to help calm all of those things down. So that might be taking a drink of cold water. It might be counting to 10, taking deep breaths, things like that. And that's going to calm the body down. And once we've calmed our body down, we then need to look at our thoughts. So going into that yellow light is where we are going to challenge our thoughts. And the SNAP language that we use is we're changing our hard thoughts, which are thoughts that keep us feeling stuck in that really big emotion, and switch it to a cool thought, which is more helpful and realistic. So for example, a child might be thinking, you know, I really hate that kid. He's always so mean to me. I'm going to hit him back. So that's a hard thought. If we continue to think that way, we're probably going to act in a way that's going to make our problem bigger. So we're going to challenge that with a cool thought, which could be, you know, sometimes he's nice to me, or maybe, you know, I have other friends who are nice to me that I can go play with. So now that I'm thinking that, I've calmed my mind down, and that's going to allow me to go into that, you know, green light and come up with a plan that's going to make myself feel better, everyone else around me feel okay, and keep my problem nice and small. So it's a very, you know, simple sequence, but with the repetition of it, it's really teaching kids how their thoughts, feelings, and actions are all interconnected. So SNAP is cognitive behavioral therapy, as we said, so it is really looking at how to calm our body down, calm our mind down, so that we can come up with good plans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On to the next. So at the core, the SNAP program is the SNAP clinical program and the school program. They all work on the same, in a sense, the same pattern. 13-week program with children in one room and their parents or their caregivers in another room. Both of them learning the same material at the same time and able to come together afterwards to actually work on the outcomes and practice. Basically, a lot of the things that we try and do is make sure that children have the possibility of seeing a role play, of acting in a role play, and of continuing that role play with their parents when they do get home. The intake and assessment are really a 2-week, 3-week process, in that we do an environmental scan where we actually are looking at the school environment, the home environment, and really sussing out what other needs might be existing in that family. So it might be family counseling, it might be individual counseling for one of the caregivers. It might be more addressed towards school supports and that advocacy piece. It really is connecting the kids. If an agency does have the capacity to work with the kids in a direct way on all of these levels, that's great. Otherwise, we pull in community partners. That is a big part of this, the community partner piece. I'm sure you all understand quite well. Is really what brings us to learn today, because we know that that you work in the same ways that we do.
And if I can just say, for those of you working in school-based settings where maybe your ability to engage with parents is more limited, what this slide is outlining is really our clinical program, but the way that we engage parents through the school-based program or our universal program looks a little bit different. So not to worry if you have challenges in engaging parents. We've thought about that and have ways to address it.
It's the secret sauce. Everybody wants to know.
Well,
How do you engage the seemingly disengaged parent, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Oftentimes the seemingly disengaged parent is living the problems themselves, and sometimes they've been living this on a dynamic in their family for several years, several generations.
Yeah.
So
it's very good to bring up too. Yeah, thank you.
So on this slide, we basically see, I'll point you directly to the brain's, this was research done with Child Development Institute and Sick Kids. We basically looked at kids' brains before they started the program, and we compared it to after the program. Now, specifically what we were trying to do was trigger their aggression, their emotional regulation problems by basically doing a game where they were finding it, they played it, it was easy, suddenly it got more difficult, and some of the patterns that they had understood were no longer there. So so frustration was triggered, and what you will notice is that basically the cognitive control areas, the regulation areas, were not firing up at all. At first, the emotions, the aggression was really raw and direct. After the 13 weeks, we found more self-regulation, more in a sense, a stance that takes a step back and analyzes the situation. So we're seeing that executive function happening directly on the slide.
so we talked before about, children's brains being quite plastic and being able to, form new pathways and neural responses. And so we're able to point to that here, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the important thing about this as well is those last two lines. This is a measurable effect, and it is measurable 2 years post-treatment. So we're looking at something that does stick.
Yeah, for those of you who are interested in some of the research around our outcomes, we have, a wealth of information at our fingertips that show we've had randomized control trials done on the SNAP clinical model that, as Fred said, show not only decreases in these problematic behaviors while kids are in treatment, but that those decreases sustain for a long period of time. So we're happy to share those for folks who are interested.
And on this slide, we do have this will be one of the videos that you should go to.
I'm actually thinking, Fred and Catherine, if you don't mind, just under our time constraints, I'm thinking maybe we'll send that link out to folks who are interested in viewing it after today's webinar, since we'd be sending them sort of outside to do it anyway. I hope that's okay with everybody. It's just an opportunity for you to sort of see what it looks like when a child is working their way through that SNAP strategy that Nicole demonstrated earlier. So for those of you who are interested to sort of see what it looks like, we invite you we'll share the link after the webinar and make sure that you have the ability to see that.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Marissa, I'm going to leave this to you.
Yeah, for sure. So we mentioned briefly before that we have a few different ways of being able to deliver the SNAP program, understanding that community capacity may look different across the country, whether if there doesn't exist a children's mental health service agency in a community. that might be able to provide a fulsome wraparound clinical intervention like the one that we described a little bit earlier. And in response to that, but knowing that we want as many children and families across the country, and certainly in Quebec, to have access to a program like SNAP as possible, we have developed over time a few different implementation options to try to be able to be responsive to meeting kids and providing services where it makes the most sense in communities. So that pink box that you see across the top really is that wraparound service that Fred mentioned just a few minutes ago, typically done, after school or out of school hours, sometimes in clinical or mental health settings where we're engaging the children and the parents and caregivers in group therapy at this, ideally at the same time, where they're learning similar things. The parents are learning, obviously, additional parenting skills and, refining and tweaking some of those skills so that they know how to best work with some of these challenging behaviors that they're seeing from their children, as the children are learning how to use the SNAP strategy and apply it to the situations that they may be encountering. In addition to that, though, we do have a school-based approach. We think of it as a more universal intervention or prevention program. So, it's all based in the same evidence-based model that the clinical program is. It's 12 weeks of curriculum designed to be developed in a co-ed setting within a school or within a classroom, where the person facilitating that program could be, an EA, an assistant, whether you have mental health support workers within your systems. And we're also looking at the opportunity to use that universal model, whether it can be successfully implemented, not just in a classroom, but in other community type settings as well. And then other pieces that we're developing, just for your own sort of information, to know that we're continually pushing the envelope in our own innovation, we see within our clinical model a real need to keep youth engaged as they become adolescents. So we have a SNAP Youth Leadership stream that's available to, to our sites that are looking to continue to engage our kids as they become youth. And then in Ontario specifically currently, with help from the Ontario government, we are developing a SNAP Youth Justice model, which is designed for kids in that teenage age group who are already involved in the justice system and either engaged or sort of, currently in custody facilities or who are part of community probation programs. So we're constantly looking to innovate how we deliver our services. I think we can go to that next slide. So this just highlights a little bit of what I spoke to before. I won't go through it in too much detail, but just so you can sort of see how the clinical models and our universal or our school-based models sort of vary. So obviously the full continued care model is quite intensive in what we offer, and the universal approach really focuses on curriculum delivery to the students. And then, as we were saying, that, that coveted or that magic sauce of how to engage parents, we absolutely think it's imperative that the learning that happens in the classrooms with regards to impulse control, problem solving, conflict resolution, and emotion regulation are able to go home so that they can be supported and practiced in the home as well. So we look to do that in our school-based or universal model through, everything from working with those local schools or school boards to develop workshops or opportunities to bring parents and caregivers into the school facility to be taught, what that SNAP strategy is all about and how they can use it in their own, in their parenting and in their homes, and just so they know what the children are learning as well, to pamphlets or flyers going home with the children during the course of their SNAP engagement. But we are working on new ways to do that as well. So I'm going to ask if we can switch to the next set of slides. We are currently in the final stages of development of a SNAP for Schools app. So this will allow for schools across the country who are interested in facilitating the SNAP for Schools program. Typically, it's been a manualized program. All of our implementations are manualized, so they're very easy to follow and everything is laid out. But we're now taking that and digitizing it for our school-based implementations. So we'll we'll give you the opportunity to see what that looks like in just a moment, but rather than holding a paper manual, a facilitator in a classroom will be able to facilitate using a tablet. Things will be projected onto a screen for the class that allows for engagement, and you'll see, I think, that it's pretty cute and well done. And then a piece of this app development, and we'll show you what that looks like in just a moment, will also include a parent portal, so that there will be a SNAP parent app where they will be able to pick up on tips and tricks and tools and home practice opportunities that any parent or caregiver will be able to access from an app to support that work as well. So it's another great way for us to transfer some of that knowledge home. So we can have a peek here. Are we going to send people?
Hi everyone, welcome back to session 8. Today we are going to talk about peer pressure and what you can do if you feel pressure to do something you don't want to do. Who can tell me what peer pressure means?
So we just wanted to give people a little taste through this webinar of what the app will look and feel like. So each of the sessions, so this is obviously quite well into that 12 weeks of curriculum. Each of the sessions will start with the ability for the teacher to help the class will develop a goal, and they'll be able to sort of rate their goal on a weekly basis, and they'll be able to enter that data into the app in real time. That use of the app will collect all of that data and participation data so that the classrooms and the teachers and facilitators are able to track that progress. But then obviously it helps with the facilitation through the interjection of these cute little videos where we get to see Snap, who guides us through some of the elements of the program and asks questions out to the classroom, and then the in-classroom facilitator will sort of continue to facilitate that discussion. The other piece that we've wanted to do, we know that role plays are a very integral part of the SNAP learning, but that there was often a lot of pressure on the part of the group facilitators or those classroom facilitators to demonstrate what the role play looks like so that the children then know how to properly replicate it. So we tackled that by providing sort of canned role plays through the help of some of our youth in and around our building here. So we can have a little look at what those role plays look like.
She's not looking, let's skip this chair, it's so fun. If I kick the chair, will you be my friend? Or will you not be my friend? Oh, my stomach hurts. I feel nervous. If I kick the chair, I'll get in trouble, and I want to keep my problems small. Okay. Logan, you know what? I'm not going to kick the chair because it's rude and disrespectful, and I don't want to get in trouble. You're missing out.
So obviously this allows for a demonstration of the skill in a controlled environment. We get to see the child, and the facilitator can sort of help break down what the class has just watched. So, we can see him snapping his fingers. We can see him counting to 10 to calm down. We see some of those identifying of feelings, what his body cues are, that his stomach is hurting and he feels nervous, how he's calming that down, the hard thoughts he's having and the cool thoughts that he's using to overcome them, and then coming up with a plan that's going to help keep his problems small. So we've tried to provide role plays for all of the sessions that allow, hopefully, for really easy facilitation in the classroom.
See you next week. Don't forget to use your Snap.
So that's, yes, like I said, just a little teaser on what it will look like as the SNAP plays in a classroom. And then this is just sort of a mocked up. Our parent portal is still in development, but it will push out tips of the day. The parents will be able to have access to the app through their child's engagement in the classroom program, and the tips of the day will be pushed out, as will little exercises and sort of home practice opportunities, so that the conversations around SNAP and how they can, you know, work in the home can continue long past the classroom, because we know that that's obviously when the effects become bigger and more sustained, as if it's not just happening in one sphere of that child's life.
Yeah, the one thing that I do want to say about this as well, this is something that's being done in French and English. I was told that probably by May, everything French and English would be ready for rollout.
Yeah, we're just working out all the kinks in English, and then it'll all be working for French.
That's it.
Yeah. So we know, if we can just advance to the next slide, that you know, our clinical model is really a long-standing, proven, evidence-based program, and our school outcomes are equally as successful. So you're seeing here some highlights from a research project on the school implementation that was done through a site that was existing in Halifax. So they engaged the services of the Resilience Research Center and some folks from Dalhousie University to do an evaluation on their school-based program. So you can see, just like the outcomes for the clinical model, that we're seeing all those things we want to see: decreased aggressive behaviors, increased self-control and emotion regulation, all of those good things. So we're trying to tick all the boxes by meeting kids where they are, meeting communities where they are, with a variety of different options, and hopefully help to support kids and families.
Yeah.
On to the next.
And these are great. I'm happy that you highlighted these, because a lot of these are very similar to the outcomes that are highlighted in for school boards, for schools, and for CLCs. So it seems to correlate really well with a lot of the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve in school setting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a slide that that really does talk about the numbers. It is really in light of this that we know that, just imagine the money that we could save for other programming if we actually reduce costs in this area. $1 spent on this program is a $32 benefit. It's basically the cost benefit analysis has been done, is available if anyone would like to see more information about that. It really is a money saver rather than a cost. The catch-22 is sustainability of these sites are still difficult, because people's reaction to working in this range is, well, doesn't the school do this for us? Isn't this all done by the school? And in truth, we know the pressures on the schools are too great. We're looking at this partnership to make sure that we can work with schools, make sure that that success is the thing that we're all working on together. It really is in that collective impact model that we will see change. This is just a quick look across the country. We said 100 new sites. Just wanted to show that Quebec is really the second highest needs area. 17 sites at minimum are planned for Quebec. So we do have startup dollars for those 17 to 20 sites. And the next slide, I think, will show us a little bit more. This is a model you probably recognize. This is basically a community model that we work with. And I think that it's very, very similar to what the CLCs work with the school boards, with the community partners. It really is about pulling those community partners in place. And you'll notice that the local school board, the involvement has been there since the beginning. And really it is, the word that I always find too small on this is towards the bottom, and it says sustainability. We're looking really to make sure that that sustainability is built in.
Yeah, so as Fred said, I think what we're learning from the work that we've been doing and engaging with Fred, particularly in Quebec, is that you have an existing wonderful, sort of infrastructure and growing awareness of the benefit of communities coming together and networks and different agencies and organizations coming together to work and tackle the issues that your communities may be facing. And, I think that's lovely for us to hear, because that is absolutely, a piece of the work that we want to do as well. So, clearly one of our goals is to have the SNAP evidence-based program be available to children and families, across the region, across the country, because we know that that can be of benefit. But, alongside with that is a real investment from us and our team and the folks who support us to support what communities are already doing and how we can support those community teams, either that already exist or to help bring them together if they don't already exist, to talk about the needs of the children and families in their communities that are maybe being underserved or unrecognized at the moment, and strategize together as a community how we can work to address those gaps in service and make sure that children and families are able to get to the doors of service that will meet their needs. So we certainly see SNAP as a piece of that work, but we know that, in communities of different capacities and agencies of different capacities, what that may look like in different communities will differ. So we have dedicated dollars and people, including folks like Fred, who are willing and able to help galvanize those communities of folks together to help make sure we're really supporting children and families in your communities. And one of the ways, sorry, Fred, you want to take this one?
No, please feel free.
Sure. So one of the ways that we are looking to support children and families across the country is through support currently from the federal government that we've received at Child Development Institute and SNAP, to be able to offer a suite of onboarding services or startup services to organizations, agencies, or school boards who are interested in licensing the SNAP program. So we are about halfway through this fairly major national expansion project right now. So our push continues. So what we have to offer for those organizations who are interested currently is free access to training, materials, consultation, technology, the posters, the manuals, all of the materials required to operate the program. And we're able to offer all of that at no charge to organizations that meet some very basic criteria, which is really just about being child and family centered in your approach to your work. And, depending on whether we're looking at the clinical or the school-based program, what those sort of staffing requirements look like are a little bit different, but we're happy to have that conversation with anybody who's interested. So now's a great time if you are somebody within your system who sees the need for these types of services to be bolstered for the children and families that you're working with. Now's a great time for us to continue to have this conversation while these free supports and services are on the table. I think it's averaged out that we're talking about, $65,000 to $85,000 worth of free, in-kind supports that we're able to bring to the table. So we want as many folks as possible to take advantage while that's available.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the key thing for me in this as well is this is from my perspective an English minority language group starting this process and going to a francophone partner in your area could be a very good match, because rather than being offered a scenario after it's been set up only in French, we have the possibility of putting this in both languages in several places right away.
Yeah. And one thing I do like and can appreciate about the program is that it's adaptable to the different realities, and that it's it's again with that minority language population. I think that there's something really special and tangible that you bring to the table in that respect. Yeah. So just basic time check. We're at 2:30.
We're
And
pretty
so-
much there, yeah.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
pretty
great.
much there. This slide really is a slide that has set up, in a sense, the partners that SNAP has been using in Toronto for all of these years. Ideally, this same slide has to be made for Quebec and has to be made for different regions in Quebec. The partners may change. Some of the partners are key partners and should stay. These are people that can be reached out to support. We're trying to build up a bigger list of foundations as well that already are pre-softened, that know about the program, that have through one champion or another heard the story, and thus making it easier for it to actually get to that sustainability point.
Mhm. And if I can just add something to plant the seed to think about is in certain areas, like when you're looking at it from the community perspective, particularly in smaller towns and villages and areas, you know, when you have big industry, one or two big industries that, you know, are the ones receiving these students after they graduate, you know, that's a
Absolutely.
great partner.
Really good point.
Yeah.
Just, and we have, you know, for those of you who are interested in, you know, thinking about how you might approach some of those industries for, you know, possibly financial support for a program like SNAP, we're certainly willing to help with that as well. We have, as I said, this sort of wealth and depth of information at our fingertips, and we're more than happy to share it.
Shameless plug on one of our upcoming webinars. We're gonna have someone talking about particularly that is like how to approach funders and donors. So for all of you who are interested, keep an eye out for the next PRT update, where we're gonna keep updating you on the different webinars. But of course, using the resources that you have here, particularly if you're interested in bringing the SNAP program. These folks we've talked to a couple of times are really great. So I will give you a chance to say any kind of like last words before we open it up to Q&A, and then we'll bring it back to you at the end. Does that sound good?
Yeah. I think there's one more slide probably in that deck that just has some contact information for us. We have a great resource in Fred, who's on the ground in and around you. So we will continue to look to him for support and know that he will be there to support all of you as well. And you know, I think just one of the pieces, it's really important, it's an integral part of the SNAP program for the kids, is that we leave our children thinking about how they are going to go back to parents and caregivers and talk about what they learned, what SNAP is, and how they're going to use it in their life. And so, you know, maybe we put the same sort of challenge out to you, and we can maybe hear some of your answers in the chat box afterwards during the Q&A, but just also to think about, you know, has this conversation triggered in you the thought that, like, oh, I know the right person that needs to hear about this program, or, you know, I know a family who really needs this program, and you know, I have some thoughts on how I can maybe get them to the doors of service. So just to give that some thought as well. Yeah. I think that is it. We are also, just so you know, if anybody, I realize not everybody always stays for the Q&A, so just before you maybe sign off, just to let you know that we will be sharing some of the video links. By all means, Catherine will be helping to send that out. And we'll also be including a PDF of a guide that was developed. We refer to it as the middle years guide. It's really looking at why these middle years age group are really critical for learning self-control and impulse control and problem solving, and integrates some really specific key tips that parents and caregivers can use with their children around how to use the SNAP strategy, how to improve communication and clear direction setting, so that we're focusing on the good but able to handle the bad as well.
And we do have in CDI, we do have a resource that really is willing to come into Quebec. They're working on translation of documents. They're working on several things to bring them into Quebec in a bigger way. And I just like to say that I act mostly as a conduit, and every time I ask them for new documentation or something, I get that very quickly and can pass that on. So if you have any anything that you're looking for in the area, specifically in services to children 6 to 12, they have that material already done. They have that research already done.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to bring back a question that was posed previously. So working, with the generational trauma found in the First Nation communities. So I don't know if you want to share a bit of experience, but first, maybe I'll open up to Mike Isaac. Mike, would you like to share a little bit of that context? I know that you also went into a little bit more detail. Not sure if you're able to unmute, put your video back on.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that question, simply because I have a large First Nations population here, and I am also First Nations, and I've experienced a lot of the trauma that has been upon our communities from one generation to the next, residential schools, various policies, and so on and so forth. And a lot of these, experiences have caused some harm. Minor harm in others and major harm in others. And one of my concerns is, and I was listening and I said, it's a great program. I'm thinking about, for example, we have one issue in a lot of communities, not just First Nations, drug and alcohol abuse. You can take those individuals and bring them to a treatment center, and they're given tools and strategies on how to deal with their pain and suffering. And they understand why they're doing what they're doing. Then they're placed back in the environment that created that stress and that trauma. And then in no time at all, they're going to revert back to what makes them feel good again. So I'm looking at this, and we all know too, and it was mentioned in your presentation that the brain development, especially for our young people, quite formulated. And I've done this since I've been here at the school, providing workshops for my students on healthy relationships, conflict resolutions, a lot of those things. And they get it when they hear it, but in a very short time, they forget it. They don't use the strategies that they learned a month ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever. So it's a constant battle of bringing those workshops in to reinforce. And I do that. In itself is not just a checkoff. So what is the response to that in relation to this new program? And there was also some discussion about parental involvement. We have difficulty getting parents involved. In fact, about a handful, maybe half a dozen of our high school kids are basically raising themselves. We have a number of elementary students who are in denial that their child doesn't need any kind of assessment of any kind, a learning assessment, and so on and so forth. Not a lot of support. Very much like the gentleman that said, he lives this, he understands it's a cycle, and sometimes it's very difficult for parents to be able to break that cycle or even understand how they can be more positive in their approach in supporting school and their child. So I'm looking at that as a universal concern, how that program can be helpful in that capacity. Yeah.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for sharing your experiences. It's certainly something that we are, I think, cognizant of and trying to learn and build on every day in our work internally. And I think it's fair to say, without diminishing the program or our agency at all, that we don't claim that SNAP is going to be the solution to long-standing systemic and complex issues. What we do hope is that we can, through the program, work with children in the school setting and children and their caregivers or parents in the clinical programs to start to look at challenges in a new way and provide them with a strategy that can work and is proven to work. So on the clinical end, just a some interesting facts, I think. So the clinical model is 13 weeks in length. Our research shows that it takes sort of participation in 8 out of those 13 to see those positive outcomes. So we work really hard. The program is designed to be engaging and interactive, and full of lots of positive reinforcement and praise to keep kids and families coming back, with the goal that once, you know, if they're able to make it to 8 out of those 13 sessions, that they see those positive, really positive outcomes, and we can draw really strong correlations. Certainly any exposure to SNAP we think is positive. So, you know, having said that, we also know that what a school is able to achieve in the course of a, say, school, like a classroom curriculum, because we don't necessarily have those strong ties or the ability to engage the parents and caregivers, is a challenge. So we're certainly focusing on the children in our school-based curriculum. Again, it's 12 weeks of sessions. So the idea is that over the course of that repetition of the strategy of learning what SNAP is, practicing using it, and layering it into different types of challenging situations, over the course of that 12 weeks, we're reinforcing it enough. And it's obviously happening. The goal is that it starts to happen in the classroom, you know, absent, you know, even when those sessions aren't happening, that the classroom teachers and ideally the school as a whole starts to use SNAP language and SNAP technique as sort of the general lens or framework for how we deal with conflict in the school and in the classroom. So we have posters and learning logs and you know, tools that can be used in moments of conflict that a teacher can use with a group of students, that a teacher and a principal or an administrator in the school can use when an issue arises, to really continue to the reinforcement of SNAP language, of SNAP approaches and SNAP strategy, so that it becomes a more generalized learning across that school environment. And then, as we said, as much as possible, we're going to look to push that learning home as well. And depending on the interest of and the ability of those individual schools or school boards that we're working with, you know, if there are opportunities and the interest to engage, you know, try to engage families through workshops or other experiences, then we certainly look to do that too. But we know that families will have other issues that need to be addressed that take priority over something like SNAP. So in the clinical model, that intake and assessment is helping to determine, is now the right time? Is SNAP the right thing for this family at this time, or do we need to address other issues first so that the family and the child is, you know, sort of SNAP ready? Because we know it's not going to be the fix for some of the more complex things that families may be faced with.
What I have seen, one of the things that always impresses me is after usually about 5-6 weeks, first off, we've convinced parents that this is working. So just in that taking parents through the journey where they really have a lot of doubts that this is going to make any difference, by session 5, we're usually seeing the parents convert. By about session 7, we're starting to see the kids advocate for their friends, saying, Bobby really needs this program. So we're basically getting that recognition that this is something that's working for them. If we can continue that on, that would be amazing. I don't know that we can address all of the issues, but I know that the kids that are coming back now, we do provide a 2-year window in the SNAP scenario in the West Island. We have a site that's working in English and in French. And there we've got a group of families now that are engaging on their own, that are coming to other programs, that are part of, in a sense, part of the community. Whereas before they were feeling very much like they were alone. They were the only parents that had problems with their kid. And we all know that's not the case.
So this sounds like it's there's like kind of like a continuum of services that people can access depending on where they are and how ready the school or the board or the organization is in terms of engaging with the program, right? So you highlighted the different programs available. You also mentioned that you have some tips. I sent the PDF through the chat, but I also maybe would, I'm going to try sharing it just very quickly just to show that there are tips that you can kind of like your take home for today is like you have these tips that you can refer to. So I'll just show you what that looks like here. So do you guys see the PDF? Yeah. So different, you know, parts of what was presented to you today, and then, you know, the tips for healthy parent-child relationships, which is of course something that is very much it's some of the resources that are being asked for by the schools quite a bit. You're not seeing that? Oh,
it's not scrolling through. I see the type, the cover page, but yeah.
All right. Well, then we will just. Oh, it's because it's paused for some bizarre reason. That's okay. Well, we sent it out through the chat, and we're going to send it obviously through the follow-up. Any last questions from participants before we wrap up? No other questions? Okay, so I'll ask a few more of my own. If somebody is interested in furthering the discussion with you, who do they reach out to? How can they find out more? You mentioned the books before, the resource guides. How can people access those?
Yeah.
All the ways that participants here, or those watching the recording, can find out more information. And then bring that information to the decision makers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
All the good ways that they can work with you.
Great question. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we definitely want to utilize Fred's on the ground capability and capacity and knowledge of the networks and the conversations that are already in play in the area. So we certainly want to encourage you, if you have interest or think you know sort of somebody who might be have interest in talking about the possibility of bringing SNAP into the services that you offer. We'll make sure that Fred's contact is available to everyone. We'll also make sure that we leave you with the link to our website. So Stop Now and Plan has its own website, stopnowandplan.com, which has a lot of the research and the pieces that we spoke about today. We also have a public YouTube channel, so we're happy to share all of those resources with you. And we'll maybe send Catherine as well the link to, so the guide that we've shared initially here is for the general public and includes, some reference to the issue that we're trying to address and some tips and techniques that parents, caregivers, and folks working with children can employ sort of immediately. But we'll also make sure that we send you some more specific information on the SNAP program and what that can look like in a community, so that you can take that and share it with some of those decision makers in your arena if it's not yourself, and have a thing on SNAP at your fingertips that will answer some of those questions. And the door is open to Fred, or of course to Nicole or I, for further conversation.
And I am definitely available. I've been following the Laurent Commission around the province, and being in as many of those sessions as I could. I'm very available to come to different regions of Quebec to basically put together the community team that needs to be there to support the program or any program when they do come together. So a big part of my role is making sure that that we've got fertile ground, that we've pulled the right partners to the table to help make those decisions. And I believe one of the decisions that they might make is that we need to work with this 6 to 12 area. We need to be on the ground in different locations of Quebec. The research has showed us that has shown us that there is definitely a need, and I think we can address it.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me think of for those of you who might be sitting on the table de concertation for the youth. Some of them go from 0 to 18, others are from 6 to 12. There's a great possibility to connect with the other partners around that same issue. Like Fred mentioned previously, the ability to work both in English and French in terms of bringing, you know, different resources together on this. So that could be interesting as well.
Et oui, je parle en français aussi, donc put me in front of your partners.
Wonderful. Any last thoughts or questions?
Well, I definitely want to thank you very much for this opportunity. This has been a wonderful opportunity to get out in front of the different CLCs, the different schools, school boards, and I hope we work in partnership together.
And thank you to all of you who took an hour and a half out of your afternoon to be with us today. We really appreciate it.
So thanks, everyone. All details coming soon by email, and this recording will be made available to you and others if you'd like to share it with them as well.
Wonderful. Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much.